Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to have with me once again Daniel McAdams, the Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Thank you for joining me again, Daniel.
Thanks so much for having me back, Jay.
Always good to talk to you. We missed you last week, but so we have a little catch-up to do today. I guess what I'd like to ask you about first, since it's so much in the news right now, the Ebola crisis. I don't know how much of a crisis it is, if it's as important as the mainstream media is trying to tell us it is or not. I think you have to take any kind of a disease seriously that obviously is contagious. But one of the interesting things, articles that you had posted on the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity website, only one congressman cares about the U.S. military. And this has to do with the idea of Obama sending U.S. military personnel into these Western African countries where the Ebola disease has broken out. Talk to us a little bit about Congressman Walter Jones and his view of this policy, proposed policy anyway, by President Obama.
Sure, Walter Jones is first of all, he's on the board of the Ron Paul Institute, so we're so fortunate to have him, and he's a dear friend and really one of the few greats on Capitol Hill, one of the few honest men up there. But Walter Jones, as you know, was at first in favor of the Iraq War, and then he slowly realized, pardon me, how evil it was, and he completely turned and became a fierce anti-war activist, despite the fact that he's a Republican and his district includes the Marine Camp Lejeune and a lot of military personnel. And you remember back in the 2000s, there was a lot of concern. They wanted to say that Walter Jones just didn't care about the military. He doesn't love our country, et cetera, et cetera. And but the military knew different, and they understood different. And they understood that he was looking out for their interests, from keeping them going to dangerous and unconstitutional wars. He's the one who cared about them, and that's why he was reelected with large margins, despite the neocons constantly attacking him. And I think this article is just another example of how much Walter Jones actually cares about the members of the military rather than the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
I
was going to say that it's consistent with what Ron Paul discovered, too, when he was running for president, where the military personnel supported him to a far greater degree than they supported any other candidate. It seems to me at one point he may have received more votes than all the other candidates combined.
I think so, and certainly more donations. But it's the same issue. People in the military they sign up. I'm sure for the very, very vast majority, because they have no problems defending this country. But I think a lot of them, when they get in there, they realize they've been hoodwinked, and they're defending interests that really aren't U.S. interests. Certainly not our interests. And I think that's why you see a lot of people who have concerns, and when they see someone who voices those concerns for them, I think they're very attracted to that.
Yeah.
But what Walter Jones said last week, he was questioning the fact that President Obama is sending thousands of troops, I think 4,000 at last count, into the Ebola zone in West Africa. I don't think anyone understands what their mission is to be. If they're going to try to shoot the virus or something, I don't know. But what Representative Jones mentions is that have these troops been trained to operate in such an unconventional environment? Why is the president sending them on missions like this that are not at all about winning wars, which is what the military should be about?
Mm-hmm.
And why hasn't the president bothered, forget about asking Congress, even just mentioning it to Congress, that he's sending troops in really what is harm's way, if they're going to be dealing with this potentially deadly virus? And what happens when they come home? What safeguards are in place? And there are just no answers coming from the administration.
Yeah.
I think that just like with ISIS, they've just scared the holy heck out of every American about Ebola, so that everyone just lays on their back and says, "Please do whatever you want just to protect us, please."
Mm-hmm.
So
well, the fear factor,
Absolutely.
and your government is here to help you.
Exactly.
Yeah, your government is here to help you. Right. We know that's we know that's true. Our government really does a great job of helping us. Well, I suppose in some ways it does, but But certainly, I mean, how can we look at what's going on around the world, and everywhere we go, we destabilize things with our military action, create more chaos, it seems, in the Middle East. That seems to be really the case. I'd like to talk to you, though, Daniel, get your update perhaps on what's going on in the Ukraine. We haven't talked too much about, well, we missed you last week, so, but what's happening in Ukraine now? You had another very interesting missive on your website. Actually, it was, I think you were on RT talking about an article that came out from Der Spiegel. Germany knows now for sure who shot down flight MH17. Talk to us about that. What's the story there?
I think there are a couple of very interesting points to make about this. It was over the weekend, Der Spiegel came out with this article saying that the head of the German intelligence had briefed a secret parliamentary committee in Germany earlier in the month, saying that the German intelligence had done its own investigation on the shoot down of Malaysian flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine back in July, and that it had concluded that the shoot down was done from a Ukrainian military base, from material captured from the Ukrainian army by the rebels in East Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
I was, as you say, I was on RT yesterday to discuss this, and I expressed skepticism about the report, not because I don't think it's possible, not because I think that they are lying, although I'm always skeptical about reports coming from intelligence agencies because I want to know what their agenda is, especially when there's absolutely no evidence presented. Supposedly the Germans have the evidence, that's fine, but they've not presented any of it, so none of us have been able to see it. However, that being the case, it does, if this is indeed true, it presents some very, very interesting points to ponder. One of them being, if the Germans are right, that means that the months of blaming Russia, blaming Putin, and this being the basis for a whole series of U.S. and EU sanctions against Russia, which have hurt German industry, have hurt the United States economy, have hurt the Russian economy, have destroyed relations. All of these were based on something that was not true, which is the claim by John Kerry and the U.S. government from the get-go that this was Russia who shot down the plane, and if it wasn't Putin's finger on the trigger, it was certainly a Buk missile that was provided by Russia to the rebels for such a purpose. So if the Germans are right, and I wonder, there are some things that I think are disturbing, and Robert Perry, who's a great investigative journalist, makes a point today that how do they know the operational situation on the ground? How do they know in the fog of war in eastern Ukraine whether these were rebels or Ukrainian troops? I think it's a very good question, but regardless of that, if that is the case, that means that the Russians had absolutely nothing to do with the firing of this missile. And in fact, it was the Ukrainian government who had that missile in the war zone, which was in turn captured by the rebels and fired by them, if what the Germans say is correct. So where are the apologies to Russia? Where are the apologies to Putin? Where is the canceling of all sanctions? Perhaps just a little too early for that, but it means everything the U.S. and the EU has based its policy on Russia on has been an absolute lie, and this is what happens when you shoot from the hip. Yeah.
Well, the main thing, though, Daniel, is do Americans care? I mean, this is the issue. I mean, you make a very good point. Where is the apologies to Putin? Well, the atmosphere has been so poisoned against Putin. I mean, he is just absolutely the worst guy since Hitler, and you know, we're the good guys, and Putin is an evil monster. So why would we apologize to an evil monster?
Yes. Well, maybe they should apologize to all the American business people who have been losing money left and right because of their stupid sanctions that have had absolutely no good effect.
Yeah, you might do that, and it could be that the business interest, the German interest, and others might be asking those questions, whereas the average Americans seem not to be focused on what I think is a very important issue. You know, well, that's why the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity is important, is because you are bringing out these important issues. And you know, I must say that you're really trying to keep an open mind about this, Daniel. I know that you're saying you're not sure, but where's the evidence? Where's the evidence, Der Spiegel, for what you're saying? And
funny, it was sorry to interrupt you, Jay, but
yeah.
it was the same Der Spiegel magazine that just days or weeks after the shoot down published an absolutely incendiary magazine cover. It was a picture of Putin in the front, and then all of the pictures of the dead people from the plane behind him, and it said something like, "Who will stop Putin?"
Oh my goodness.
No, so
well, and their own admission is that it wasn't Putin that did it.
It had nothing to do with it.
Had nothing to do with it. Now, I guess it would have been perhaps our weapons in the hands of the bad guys.
Well, no, it would have been Russian. It would have been the weapons, the Ukrainian army weapons. The Ukrainian army from Kiev that was going to put down the independence movement in the east. They went and attacked the independence movement in the east.
I see.
They brought all their weapons with them. The base was taken over by the rebels, by the pro-independence rebels.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the German line. And I'm saying I don't know whether it's true because I haven't seen any backup.
Yeah.
But if this is the case, that means that it was taken over by these guys, and they either on purpose or by accident or by mistake fired this missile off. So it was a weapon from Kiev. It was not from Moscow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, so they're contradicting themselves. This is a Der Spiegel also that, as I recall, said not that long ago, quoted Jimmy Carter as saying America does not currently have a working democracy. So
yeah.
So a lot of different things going on with Der Spiegel. I don't speak German, so I don't read the magazine, but
there's a lot in English actually. They have a nice English website, and it's it's I guess slightly better than The Economist. I don't know, but that doesn't say much.
Yeah, that may not say a whole lot either in many ways. Well, anyway, there's another article on the Ron Paul Institute website. Revisionist Russia has moved to the doorstep of NATO. The implication here is, of the title at least, is that Russia is now the aggressor, and just as we had to worry during the Cold War, we've got Russia's back, and we better be very careful. There could be a Ruski under our beds.
Yeah, I wrote this up because it was so amazing. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, who, as you know, Jay, a lot of people, unfortunately, on the libertarian side, on the anti-war side, they pushed so hard for him to be named and confirmed as defense secretary because they thought that he would end war and that he would oppose his own boss, And he turns out to be singing from the same hymn book as his bosses and the neocons. But he said last Wednesday that to this U.S. Army Association that the U.S. military, quote, must deal with a revisionist Russia with its modern and capable weapons army on NATO's doorstep.
Huh.
And so it's the reason why so many people notice the statement is because the reason Russia is on NATO's doorstep is because NATO expanded its way up to Russia's borders.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as if Russia moved towards NATO, it's NATO moved towards Russia. Yeah,
it's like if I punched you in the nose while I was standing next to you and I said there's a real danger of an angry Jay Taylor next to me.
Yeah.
They would say. So it was really interesting, and what I wrote up, and one of the only journalists in the mainstream media I think who does a good job is Matt Lee from the Associated Press. So if you watch any State Department briefing, you'll see him up there, the only one asking tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
And he was asking a Pentagon spokesman who happens to be a Rear Admiral, so not just some flunky, Rear Admiral John Kirby, what exactly did Hagel mean by revisionist Russia, and how could Russia be considered the aggressor when it was NATO who moved its troops onto Russia's doorstep, not the other way around?
Right.
And here's what the guy said. This is a Rear Admiral. He said, well, I think that's the way President Putin probably looks at it, but certainly not the way we look at it. So
yeah.
It's as if he's completely detached from reality.
From reality, yeah. I mean, it's not, who's expanding the turf? Who's expanding the territory since the Soviet Union went to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jay, but I'm just saying it's not a matter of interpretation. You look at a map and you see that NATO has expanded to Russia's doorstep.
Right.
So it's not a matter of interpretation. You can interpret the meaning of it, but the facts, the real facts can't be interpreted. They're real.
Well, how do you account for that? I mean, as you point out, this guy's an admiral.
Yeah, I mean, he can't be a dumb guy. So I don't know. I was a little bit sarcastic in the piece, but if someone goes, if anyone's interested, go to our website. I actually have a clip of him answering the question, and it really is something to behold. I was a little nasty. I said, it's hard to believe this is not a Saturday Night Live skit, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at how he handles and mishandles the question.
Mm-hmm. Well, if going to the Middle East, if you think about it, in many ways, President Obama was going to be the peace candidate. He was given a Nobel Prize for peace. He was going to be the one that would reverse a lot of George Bush's policies, and yet I see in the news, I think today, where he's now considering going back to the torture treatments that Mr. Bush was involved with and championing. And also, he wasn't going to get involved in Syria. Now we're dropping bombs we're dropping weapons in Syria. What can you tell us about, can you give us an update on that? What's going on in Syria and what our U.S. military is doing there?
Sure. Well, first on the torture thing, and I actually did write a little something about this today. The New York Times did a piece, I think, over the weekend.
Yes.
About the Obama administration's considering a return to the Bush era definition or interpretation of the UN Convention Against Torture, that it does not include activity outside of U.S. soil, i.e. on CIA secret facilities or U.S. military bases. And I don't want to put too strong a point on it because there's not a determination made in the administration, but there certainly is a faction within the administration arguing for Obama to retain that definition. And their chief argument is that these people overseas who are conducting this torture would be legally liable to the people they tortured if that were the case. So there's the U.S. is going to present at a convention or at a conference next month, and they will have to present their position on this UN Convention Against Torture, whether they have interpreted it as Bush does or as candidate and Senator Obama had interpreted it in the past. And it should be very interesting. What I thought about in the end, I made a little comment. Here's a real solution. How about shutting down the CIA torture facilities and the secret prisons overseas?
Yeah.
Then you wouldn't have this problem. People wouldn't be worried about being prosecuted for torture. Being prosecuted for torture because they wouldn't be doing it. But I guess that's too easy, Jay.
Yeah.
I'm a simplistic person.
Yeah, simple answers, right? And it's a complex world, and all kinds of interest in killing people and taking over countries by force, and there's a big constituency for that, and probably people that benefit and profit from it, shareholders of stocks and so forth, are not too interested in seeing peace return either. Unfortunately, it's too bad because we could make as much money and we could be a more prosperous, more healthy economy if we would stick to use our resources to produce constructive things and things that help people. I believe that. No need why we need to stoke the Keynesian stimulus by killing people. It's abhorrent to me. It just drives me crazy. But in any event, I just think, if Putin were doing what we're doing, torturing people, wouldn't we be looking for war crimes?
Yeah, and I'm sure that he has not behaved perfectly. No leader does if they can get away with it. But the U.S. is so busy pointing its finger at others that it doesn't hesitate for a second to look at itself. As you say, to look at the log in our own eye. Before we start pointing the finger at others. And I don't think I'm under no illusion that any of these other foreign leaders are saints, Jay. I'm sure they do as much as they can get away with. But why don't we solve our own problems? Why don't we sort out our own shortcomings before we start pointing at everyone else?
Here's my belief with regard to Putin and Russia, and I don't know, you can tell me if you agree or not, but it seems to me that Russia went through the ringer a number of years ago. During the Cold War, I saw Russia as an enemy of the United States. I don't know if you felt the same way. I'm not sure that I saw it as fervently as some of the pro-Vietnam people thought that we had to really worry about Russia all over the world, and that if we didn't stop them, the domino theory. I think that I wasn't ever clear that I believed that necessarily, but I did see Russia as an adversary. Okay, so Russia goes down. They have an economy that implodes, and predictably it went down because they were a command economy. But now, we're becoming the command economy. Russia had a cleansing of sorts, I think, to a certain extent. I even hear that in some ways they've sort of repealed the communist idea that maybe there is no God, the idea that you're not allowed to believe in God. It seems to me, if from what I hear anyway, that the Greek Orthodox Church is given more freedom now and is given actually some credence in the educational system there. And at the same time, here in our country, what we're doing essentially is increasing our command economy with the Federal Reserve running everything essentially, and creating all manner of problems in the capital markets as a result of it, misallocating resources and capital. We're doing, it seems to me, the same thing that in many ways that the command economy of this USSR was doing. And so my thinking is that not that Putin's a good guy, but that probably when countries go through some really tough times, it makes them alter their behavior a little bit. And I only wish that we could somehow alter our behavior before we have to go through some tough times. But Daniel, I have no doubt in my mind that we're headed for some very difficult times as a result of our domestic as well as foreign policy that you talk about every week on this show.
Yeah, absolutely, Jay. And the other similarity I would add to that is that both the USSR and now, unfortunately, the U.S., when they have found themselves getting in more and more of a bind, when their policies aren't working, what they decide to do is just crack down on dissent within the U.S., to spy on people more, to jail more people for small crimes or non-crimes. And so they both crack down at home when their policies fail. And so that's another, I think, disturbing parallel.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think you make a very good point, one that I think is a good way to end today's discussion. But to me, what I think a lot of Americans don't understand is the connection between what we're doing overseas and what happens here at home. As Ron Paul said in that one of those debates, the reason they came over here is because we're over there. That isn't hard for me to understand. If and you said a little while ago, if somebody punched you in the nose, Jay, and you said, oh, there's a good chance Jay's going to get angry and punch me back. Okay, that's exactly what we've been doing. Ever since World War II, since post-World War II, we've kept troops in how many different countries to make sure we kept control of things, and then expanded troops in how many different countries, Daniel? Where are we? How many countries?
Well, close to 1,000, I guess.
Well, I know there's not 1,000 countries.
No,
but
I'm sorry. 1,000 bases. 1,000 bases. Sorry.
Oh, 1,000 bases. Okay, yeah, and so well over 100 countries, though, right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
and so how would we like it if the Chinese decided they were going to put their bases in our country all over the place? It's just, to me, it's just, how can we just? I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand how. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is that there is a reason to care about what goes on in the Ukraine, in Syria, in Iran, in Iraq, and all these different countries, because what we're doing over there has blowback. It has an effect here on our lifestyle. Not only, I think one of the things that people really miss is the economic cost to our country of these wars. And so, what is that doing to our economy over the longer term? But more to the point, also liberty, our ability to be free and not be spied on and watched by our government is, I think, people really need to realize that there is a connection, Daniel, between what you're doing, what the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity is doing, and their own well-being here at home. And I would just appeal to my listeners out there, if you can make that connection, and if you care about your liberty here at home, you might want to consider just sending a little bit of money to the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity will go an awful long way, because Daniel is really running this operation on a very low budget, and he works extremely hard. And I guess, Daniel, you kind of got used to that, though, when you worked for Ron Paul, because Ron wasn't lavish either. I mean, he was very careful about how he spent the taxpayers' money.
No, absolutely he was. And we had to work twice as hard because we couldn't accept either the Republican or Democrat talking points. So we had to actually read the bills, which most people didn't do.
Well, we laugh, but we shouldn't laugh, because that's a sad commentary on our country, that bills get passed without these guys having the foggiest idea about what's in them. So thank you very much, Daniel, for sharing with us once again and enlightening us on what's actually really going on around the globe, as opposed to what our propagandists are telling us on the mainstream media. It's really good to have you again with me.
Thank you, Jay.